So far we looked at perfect competition, where there are many buyers, many sellers, and all sellers have exactly the same product. So they provide identical products. There is no product differentiation. There is no advertising. There is nothing like branding. Yeah, you don't see a cabbage branded with a luxury name, or a cotton branded with a luxury. Maybe there are different varieties, but these prices are determined in the world market, right? Forex markets, for example, these are usually fiercely competitive markets. So this is a perfect competition, example of perfect, near perfect competition. So monopoly is something that may exist, but these days governments do not allow a company to be a monopoly in any way. Governments prefer having some sort of competition. So, however, the definition of monopoly is that there are many buyers but one seller. Basically, one seller is the market. It provides whatever the product in the market in that type of product is available. Yeah? So these are the two extremes. In between lies imperfect competition. Basically, the two extremes are the kind of negative perfect correlation and positive perfect correlation in statistics. In between lies all the source of reality. Here the same thing in economics. We have the imperfect competition. There is a bit of degree of competition among sellers, but there is no single dominant seller, and the products are not identical. They are similar but not identical. So we'll define them in a minute in more details. And some of these, one of the two imperfect competition types will kind of overlap with both monopoly and imperfect competition as well. So let's look at these two cases. So the middle two cases, I whitened the details for the perfect competition and monopoly. We looked at them last time. Under monopolistic competition, there will be many or several firms in the market, depending on how you look at the market. You can localize the market, then you have several sellers. But if you increase the coverage, so look at the province level, city level, for example, or country level, then obviously many sellers will dominate the market in monopolistic competition. But in locally, there could be several sellers of a product with different names, though, and different brands. And entry is unrestricted, and products, however, will be differentiated. So you can think of builders, restaurants. If you go to a restaurant, let's say there are too many Indian restaurants, but they don't provide exactly the same meal. So there's the differentiation. As a result, you tend to go to that single Indian curry restaurant, even if there are many other local ones, right? So, or Turkish restaurants, go to Turkish kebab houses. You like one of them and you go and keep buying from them. That's because they differentiate. Yeah, they offer you something else in addition to what they're selling. So that's what it is about, differentiation. Demand curve, unlike the perfect competition, it's downward sloping, but relatively elastic because there is a bit of competition. So elasticity is due to the availability of substitutes. Now, oligopoly, there are very few sellers or producers, and the market is usually restricted because oligopolies tend to be very large and they would have economies of scale, and starting a new business in that oligopolistic market requires a lot of outlay of investment, or it could just be a price-based restrictions, like the prices are too low for you to enter the market. Products can be undifferentiated or differentiated. It could be identical in the market, given that few sellers are there, or it could also be differentiated due to, for example, advertising, branding, packaging, many different ways. Petrol is an oligopolistically supplied product, so you don't have many of them. Petrol companies, you have 5 or 6 of them. So cars, there are certain brands in Europe that most of us buy usually, the cars, or electrical appliances. Samsung, what else is there? LG, quite a few, but then main ones are very few. It's like mobile phone companies as well, they are oligopolies. Samsung, Apple, Motorola, few others, but today maybe it's a little bit saturated because of Chinese entry through online platforms, but mostly it's oligopoly. And the demand curve, not horizontal, again, is downward sloping. The goods are inelastically supplied because of the fewer competitors in the market. So let's go over quickly this main features of monopolistic competition. There are many sellers. In monopolistically competitive, so you see, this is monopolistic competition rather than just competition or monopoly. So competition relates to perfect competition, monopoly part relates to monopoly. So monopolistic competition. There are many firms, however, many sellers in the market. So each firm is very small compared to the market as a whole. Think of Indian restaurants, Thai restaurants, there are so many of them in London. So one firm is small compared to the market, but then it's also monopoly. I'll tell you why it is. So this feature of having many sellers in the market is similar to perfect competition case, where firms are numbered in hundreds or thousands. But monopolistically competitive firms can differentiate their products, and I've given you reasons, examples of them: packaging, advertising, freebies, or side plates in restaurants. So these make this monopolistically competitive firm more attractive to certain segments of the consumers, so they keep buying from them. In this way, they are monopolists in that taste range, say, in that product range, let's say. Maybe they are similar products, but in one range, they basically monopoly in that range. So as a result, they face a downward sloping demand curve, because if they want to sell more, they need to reduce the price. To attract more customers. Or if they raise the price, then obviously, even if you're really liking this product, you may just switch because there is something else. You know, the juice producers, there are plenty of them. Orange juice, most of these are similar. But you may like one of them, like say innocent juice, or you may be buying them, but the prices now are increasing, and you decide to buy a Tesco's own brand, let's say, So they lose as a result customers. But then once they are set the taste and then attract the customers, these customers tend to buy from them. As a result, they have monopoly power in that range. Now there is also free entry or exit in this market, though, because if a lot of sellers enter the market, just like in perfect competition, the market is then diluted. Toothpastes. If you go to toothpaste aisle in supermarkets, well, you see plenty of them. Plenty of different brands. One is for whitening, one is for strengthening your enamel, or some are for sensitive teeth, different varieties basically. Here are examples of monopolistically competitive industries or their products. Quite a few. There are so many types of whatever you buy. This list is not exhaustive, it goes on. All right, moving on now. So monopolistic competition, what's the equilibrium? Equilibrium is the same for all market structures, including monopolistic competition case. In equilibrium, profits are maximized at the point where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. However, the price is not equal to marginal revenue because the demand is downward sloping, just like in the monopoly case. In the long run, supernormal profits can be competed away, and we may see a case where profit equals average revenue, and that also equals average cost. This is the result of having no barriers to entry, because new firms enter the market, demand curve usually shifts to the left. Here it is. Look at this now. This is where we're making short-run abnormal profits. So this is the marginal cost, upward sloping. As we produce more, costs rise. Marginal revenue is downward sloping because demand is downward sloping. Now, at this point, this is the point where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. The quantity that maximizes profit is fixed. So if you move up to this demand curve, you reach the point where demand then helps you to determine the price, which is this amount here. So price is this amount. But the cost of making, average cost of making the quantities here is basically lies on the ATC, average total cost curve. So the difference between price and average total cost curve, assuming average total cost curve is lower than price, gives us per unit profit. So this difference here is the per unit profit. If you times it by the number of products sold, or the quantity here, this whole region is now total profit. So this rectangle is total profit. It's, you see, in a way similar to monopoly case. Now we said in the previous slide, profits can be competed away in the long run. It is possible that monopolistically competitive firm makes even losses because of new entries. Now, when there are new entrants, what happens is that the demand curve, which was there, is now a little elastic, as it looks like it's more of a steeper, I should say, right? And it's shifted from this point to this point. And in this case, this price level is lower than the average total cost. So the difference is now loss. And not multiplying this loss by quantities produced gives us the total loss. So this could be a result of entry to the market, large number of firms. Obviously, once large number of firms enter the market and they settle, it becomes a short-run problem. profit maximization becomes a short-run problem. What happens now is that if each firm is making loss, firms start leaving the market, just like in perfect competition. And in this case, if there is a short-run profit, then firms start entering the market. And in the long run, they will settle somewhere, basically. And that point is this point here, now, is this point here. So there is also demand moving to the right and left. Let's think of this way. This is the usual case. Demand, let's say, was here originally. So when the demand is here, clearly the firm is making profit. So it's this case. Demand is higher, above the total cost, average total cost. So the firm is clearly making profit. So new entrants enter the market and dilute the individual demands or demand for the products of individual firms, shifting the demand curve for each firm to this point or up to this point where eventually demand curve is tangential or just kisses the side of the average total cost. Now this usually is expected to align with the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So this then determines the quantities that maximize our profit or minimize our loss, and it's also the case where price is equal to average total cost. So if the price is equal to average total cost, is basically then that's a case of zero profit. Now, so that's the case of long-run equilibrium for the monopolistically competitive firm. You can see that this is more or less the same as perfectly competitive case. However, there is a difference here for two main reasons. First, monopolistically competitive firm will still have excess capacity. Remember we talked about efficient scale that a firm usually wants to achieve along the long run average total cost curve. So with this monopolistic competitive industry, there is always excess capacity. Monopolistically competitive firm doesn't usually go and operate at the bottom of their average total cost curve. However, in perfect competitive case, we want to operate at the bottom of the average total cost curve. Now, the second reason for the case of monopolistic competitive achieving less than desirable quantities is that there is a price markup over the marginal cost. Now, price markups are usually necessary for monopolies to exist, and also they are the case for monopolistic competitive firms as well, because they have monopoly power over a single or couple of varieties, let's say, of products they supply, because they kind of know the ingredients, for example. No one else knows them. Look at Coca-Cola. No one else still knows their ingredients for making the Coca-Cola. So they, as a result, have a monopoly power on providing this taste. But at the same time, they're competing with many other firms selling similar cola products or soda products, yeah? So this is the case. They then are able to put a price markup over the marginal cost. So these two cases, as a result, create a situation where monopolistic the competitive firm doesn't produce at the efficient scale. So moving on now, I'll show you in a graph. So this is the case we look at last time. Average total cost is U-shaped. Your marginal cost curve is the same, but the perfectly competitive firm faces this horizontal demand curve. And now, firms in the perfectly competitive industry usually operate in the long run at this point. So they produce this quantity where their average total cost curve equals their price or marginal revenue. However, monopolistically competitive firm will never touch the bottom of their average total cost curve. It's a theoretical case again. Yeah? So that's because their demand is, as you can see, not flat, not horizontal. It's downward sloping. Yeah? And also they have markup. This markup, the difference between marginal cost and price, is usually there because of the marginal revenue being downward sloped, because of the demand being downward sloped. So these two reasons create this excess capacity. Excess capacity. So a markup and excess capacity are the prevailing feature of firms operating in monopolistic competitive industry. So they produce less quantities as a result compared to efficient, perfectly competitive firms which are operating at the efficient scale.